I received a DM from Devin, and he was watching our soft tissue playlist where I was going through a series of dynamic movements to open up the hips. And he wanted to know how and why do dynamic movements work, and when should he implement them into his training and racing program. Let's start first with dynamic movements. If you go to the video, go over to our playlist area. I've got dynamic movements for different body parts. I'll use, just for the sake of this video, I'll talk about the hips. You'll notice that I show holding onto a pole so that your hips are nice and squared, feet are pointing forward, and we're going to be swinging the leg forwards and backwards, and then we're going to be swinging it inward and outward. Believe it or not, when you go through a given day, your joints and your body tend to stay in the same range of motion throughout each and every. Let's take walking, for example. If I were to videotape you and we were to measure you with an ergometer, you would notice that you pretty much take the same angle of step forward, and then you pick your foot up when it gets to a certain point where your pelvis is over your foot. I don't want to bore you with all the physiology, but I do want you to understand that doing dynamic movements opens up the joints in every muscle group that you implement it, which is a win-win for you, because what our goal is always is to establish range of motion to its ideal percentage. So for example, if you're laying on your back and we're doing a hamstring flexibility assessment, you should be able to bring that leg up to 90 degrees. When you know that you can get to that 90-degree range of motion, you're going to have more power and endurance out of that muscle group. A muscle that can go through its full range of motion has more power, and it has better endurance because of the less induced self-restriction, if that makes sense. So dynamic movements are going to open up the range of motion. And when you watch the dynamic movements, what you have to be careful of is, when are you doing them? You should be doing them after a sport-specific warm-up. When you look at that video that I put together opening up the hips, I had run with my sons. We'd come back, and then we did the dynamic movements. Why? Because we need to get blood into the extremities. The body's always going to protect the heart first and foremost. So we need to get the communication to the body that we're getting ready to do some exercise. So you've got to get the warm-up in place first. That gets the blood distributed into the extremities. Then you just let the weight, could be your arm doing some dynamic movements. It could be your shoulder, it could be your hips working, swinging your thighs, getting your hips to open up. But please stay with me here. Once the tissue is warmed up and you start to do dynamic movements, not only do you increase the range of motion, but what you're doing is you're getting the muscles to naturally elongate, which is going to help tremendously on reducing the risk of injuries. Now, if you have followed me for any period of time, you know I'm a big fan of foam rollers. I know not all of us have 2 hours to do a 1-hour workout, but grab a foam roller, do a sport-specific warm-up, do some dynamic movements, grab a foam roller. If you feel any kind of hot spots, we refer to those as trigger points, you need to get those worked out, because those are like a knot in a rope, and that becomes a site of an injury. A muscle that becomes really, really tight and hunkered down. Not only, if you think about it, when we're holding a rope together, if you and I have a knot in the rope and we release that knot, the length of the rope, the rope length increases because the knot is out. Well, you're the same way. You're trying to get a muscle to have, a joint to have full range of motion, and the only way it can do that is if the muscle itself has no trigger points in them, has no knots. Now the muscle's at its full length, it has more power, has more endurance, and the risk of injury goes down. So I'll put a link to that dynamic movement at the end of this video. If you happen to have any questions about videos we've put out previously, or you need something researched or something explained, please do me a favor, send us an email. We're happy to help. contact@coachrob.com. We're posting a video every day to answer your questions. I want to say thank you for watching these videos. The number of subscribers continues to go up, and that's exactly why we want to do this. Is we want to spread the word on the truth associated with health, wellness, and performance. So thank you for taking the time today to watch this video, and we'll see you tomorrow.